With the Alice in Chains discography looming, I feel that we need to talk about the band. We need to actually give them a band review, something that has been sorely missing from this channel for quite some time. It is that way because they're one of my favorite groups of all time, so this is actually going to be a pleasure. This is not going to be something that's going to take me very long to do, so if the videos come fast and furiously, that's not any sort of movie franchise. It's just the truth. It's because I have a lot I can say about the band, but I want to kind of give them an overview right now. Alice in Chains is considered to be one of the more important groups from the grunge movement. They're also considered to be one of the more heavy groups, and both of those statements are absolutely correct. However, there's been a lot of differentiation and a lot of debate amongst a lot of people as to where they really fit in this catalog of music that we have, whether or not they really should be an alternative rock band, whether they should be a grunge band, whether they should be a heavy metal band. Well, it really doesn't matter. I mean, that's just kind of grasping at straws and pulling strings or whatever. Bottom line is that Alice in Chains is a terrific group. And I say is instead of was because, well, they're still going. The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here last year was released and was on the top 35 list. In fact, it was pretty high on that list. That's all without singer Layne Staley, who tragically was found dead. And really it was, wow. Layne Staley is one of the main reasons why Alice in Chains, the early version of the band, was really considered to be such a marvelous group. His raw lyricism, his painful almost singing style, but his just fantastic harmony that he was able to share with Jerry Cantrell definitely gave a lot to the band's success. He is an instantly recognizable voice, and he and Cantrell's unison dynamic certainly was something that gave the band a lot of praise. I mean, whenever you listen to some songs that they have done together and you hear these two parts, these two individuals coming together and really just creating this dynamic, that you would almost think that it would be kind of a clusterfuck, you know. In a lot of grunge bands, sure, there's some backing vocals here and there, but these are two people that were almost sharing the vocal responsibility. Sure, it was something where Layne was more so at the forefront, but Jerry also played his share as well. I mean, think about it. Think about the Beatles. There were many Beatles songs where, you know, any number of the four members actually sang the songs. Whether or not it was just a verse or just a simple little part in it, or if it was the whole entire damn thing, all four of them really shared a lot of creative output, and perhaps that was one of their principal undoings. However, it was something that was out there. It's one of the main reasons why all four of them had very successful and lucrative solo careers. Same could sort of be said for Alice in Chains, at least for the two singers, the two vocalists. Jerry Cantrell went on to really enjoy a couple of fantastic solo albums that got some great praise, and even though Layne Staley didn't put out a solo album per se, he was on the Mad Season supergroup, which was certainly a fantastic piece of music. It was just great. It was definitely something also that really showcased a little bit of a jazzier side, while still illuminating a lot of darkness. Layne was a really troubled guy. This band, however, didn't start off just as Alice in Chains. They were Alice in Chains, in the stylistic, you know, similarity to Guns N' Roses, where it was, you know, Alice and then just the letter N and then Chains. So, weird little parallel there. So, I guess we can thank Axl Rose for something. The fact that these guys got their start that way, but then finally made it the actual word in, I think that was certainly a good idea. Certainly something that would help in the future. I mean, think about it. Whenever you think of Guns N' Roses now, you immediately think about the 13-year gap it took for us to get Chinese Democracy. And Alice in Chains, yeah, they had a pretty long gap too, but for obviously good reason. The first three albums that Alice in Chains put out are some of the best that you're going to find from the grunge scene, and really some of the best that you're going to find from just the rock and roll department, rock scene, alternative rock scene, whatever the hell you want to call it, from the early part of the 1990s. Their initial album, which was entitled Facelift, was definitely an illuminating mix of both very dark grunge, definitely showcasing the darker element of that, but also at the same time showcasing some songwriting prowess and the ability to write songs that almost had a bit of an illumination to them. Sunshine is certainly one song that seems to prove that quite a bit, but then whenever you turn around and have songs such as Love, Hate, Love, and Bleed the Freak that definitely showcase that dark side, that darkness a little bit more, it's almost like hearing a mentality of a man that's on heroin, which is essentially what you were probably hearing, at least lyrically and probably musically to a certain extent. But then we get to Dirt. Dirt is easily my favorite album of all time out of this persuasion, not to mention my favorite from the Alice in Chains catalog. I consider it to be a perfect album. Sure, Rust in Peace was my #1 album of all time, period, by Megadeth. However, I would say that Dirt by Alice in Chains is probably a close second. Either that or, at this stage of the game, I'd actually be tied for the crown. This was a dark and brooding record. This was certainly one that had a just huge element of despair to it. And it was almost a tale of two tapes, tale of two sides. You could almost see the spiraling, the madness, the downside of perhaps being just completely wasted on drugs, and then coming down on the second portion of this album. The triumphs of, Junkhead screaming brightly, "What's my drug of choice? Well, what have you got?" Then descend and degrade into songs such as Angry Chair, which certainly have a different element to it. And then we have the Curious Tripod album, and this is just the full lengths that I'm speaking about. It's curious in the fact that it was different than the other two. It had a very, very different vibe to it, something that really incorporated a little bit more of musical expansion, a little bit of musical exploration. They were trying some new things, and it was certainly one that perhaps took some fans a little bit more time in order to get into. But this was one that was not without its great moments, such as Goddamn. Goddamn was a great example, for me at least, but then you have a song like Frogs, which in 2014 would never have any sort of respect from a band putting that out. A song like Heaven Beside You, some fans actually couldn't differentiate the difference between Alice in Chains and Nirvana, which, whenever you listen to this song, is actually kind of a fair point. There's definitely a tone there, even though Layne's signature singing style does definitely bode some differences between Kurt Cobain's, but 2 EPs, and then that was it. Jar of Flies was the first EP to ever go to #1, and resoundingly so. It's easily one of the best EPs of all time, if not the greatest. Sap, which was able to contain a hit of its own, but then after that, it was the dissolution. It was the dissolving of Alice in Chains. Layne's inability to kick his heroin habit, and really his inability to get himself straightened out, considering he had a lot of problems with depression, and really just a lot of problems with living in general, definitely caused some strain. Which caused them to untimely, break up. A couple of years later, after the turn of the millennium, Layne Staley was found dead, with an apparent overdose. I remember that I was coming home from a party that was being thrown for a girl I was dating at the time, and heard the news on the radio. I remember being stunned, considering I'd just gotten into Alice in Chains about a year or two before that, so this was a significant loss for me, because I was looking up to Layne Staley at this point as, somewhat of an icon, somewhat of an idol, somewhat of a vocal inspiration. His raw method of singing just was something that I marveled at. Since the band had already been broken up, it wasn't as though this was going to cause the band to break up, so for a while there it just continued onward as it was. However, as the 2000s began to move their way to the close, it was time to move on. Alice in Chains was going to get back together. Jerry was going to put back the boys, and they were going to find a replacement for Layne. This was something that actually came with a very mixed reaction from fans. Many people wanted to see Alice in Chains continue, you must understand. However, many people didn't think that it was fair for the band to continue without Layne, and since Layne had passed away, then it seemed, at least in their minds, that there was no reason for them to continue on. But there was still more music to really be made. And as a result, they got William Duvall, and they recorded their first post-Layne album, Black Gives Way to Blue. Really, whenever you listen to this album, if it's not apparent from the very first playthrough, it'll become apparent as you continue to listen to it, that this was definitely an album that was all about Layne. It was one that was dedicated in his honor. The song, Black Gives Way to Blue, is almost like a painful farewell. They got Elton John to play some piano on that song. It's beautiful. It's poetic. It's something that, if I ever had a television show, it would be a song that I would want to use for one of the more heartbreaking moments on that show. But I almost would be afraid to, because I feel as though it would perhaps stain the actual meaning of the song, or the honor in which the song really gives to its intended recipient. The album is not exactly received the same way as Layne's material also, which I guess is fair considering they have a brand new singer at this stage. William is new Layne, however he does have a lot of tonal similarities, and for the differences that do exist, they are ones that actually open up some new doors and some new possibilities. Most of Black Gives Way to Blue was written by Jerry Cantrell, as you might imagine, so really if the boys hadn't gotten back together, this could have easily been Cantrell's new solo album, but instead it was an Alice in Chains album. And it was one that I instantly kind of fell in love with, just based around the whole idea that I never thought I'd see an Alice in Chains album ever again, a new one at least, firstly, and secondly because it did boast a lot of great things. You didn't quite understand at that moment where the band was heading or how the band could actually, manifest itself in a new direction and an exciting direction with the addition of William Duvall, but there were definitely some moments where the seeds were being sowed. You could see it and hear it more with The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. This album took everything that Black Gives Way to Blue was able to really do and just magnified them. It magnified them by giving William a lot more of a writing ability and just basically allowed this band, who had been growing organically since the release of Black Gives Way to Blue, to just really craft an album that was a true identifier for this new identity of Alice in Chains. And it was certainly one that didn't disappoint. It was certainly one that felt like an Alice in Chains record that Layne would actually want to be a part of. That if he's in heaven or hell, he's begging God or Satan to let him come back up just to record another album. It was a true testament to the lasting power of Alice in Chains also, considering this was a very well-received album, and it was a widely purchased album. Sure, maybe some of those are because I pimped the shit out of it, but that doesn't matter. Alice in Chains, an amazing band, a band that's had a very, tumultuous history, one that's underwent various trials and have had to make some heartbreaking decisions. Still around, still kicking ass, and now finally, at long last, getting a discography review here on the coverkillernation channel. I look forward to this. I hope you are as well. And my only hope is that I can actually give these albums, through individualized review, really the justice and really the significance and meaning that they truly deserve. But there's only one way to find out. It's time to play the game.